Hey, Steve Saretsky here. As always, this is Canadian real estate market update with a particular focus on Vancouver. If you're getting sort of value or entertainment out of these videos, all I ask that you hit thumbs up and subscribe. Questions, comments, put those below. Got a lot to get through in this video this week, but wanted to start it off with some re-clarification that if you've been watching this channel for some time, that this channel was always created to create value and information for people as a way for me that I devote my time and my analysis to looking at the statistics and trying to give people a clear picture so they can make their own best financial decisions, particularly as it pertains to the housing market here in Canada. And I think that that's been a huge driver of what I've always tried to do. So I don't pander to anyone's sort of bias or beliefs, and that's the crux of it. And so I actually wanted to start it off this week, as I always talked about some of my sources of information that have been so beneficial to me. One of them has been Real Vision TV. Again, we got another donation from our friend Victor. So thanks again to the channel for donating to it. But I don't need that money, so I'm going to donate that money in the form of a Real Vision TV subscription. If you want a subscription to Real Vision TV, where they interview the top financial minds in finance, unbiased, unbelievable information, long form video content, comment below and I'll just randomly pick somebody for a 1-year subscription. Again, that's on behalf of myself and Victor. But I want to, without further ado, on that note, I want to get into my view on the Vancouver housing market and partially on the Canadian housing market as well. Okay, so as I've talked about in these videos over the last couple weeks, is that there's clearly some momentum in the Vancouver housing market. There's clearly a rebound or recovery or soft landing or dead cat bounce, whatever you want to call it. There is an increase in activity, and that can't be denied. And I have people, commenting here saying, "Oh, I'm unsubscribing. You've turned," as if you're supposed to be consistently negative or bearish, despite what the data says. That's not what's happening here. Again, just because what's happening here in the market right now in the short to medium term, does not remove any of the longer term risks or structural problems that may be surrounding the housing market here. Those risks haven't necessarily dissipated, but certainly today, in a large part thanks to central bank easing, we have a reflation in not only the housing market, but in financial markets in general. So in Vancouver, we had October sales this month, for the month of October, up in Greater Vancouver 46% year over year, 46% year over year. So obviously a massive jump. Part of that is contextual, that we had a very, very weak October 2018. But if you look at this chart, October home sales over the last 10 years, this year, October 2019, we're just slightly 5% above the long-term 10-year average for the month of October. So basically, right now, we have home sales tracking their historical long-term averages. So, we started off the year in multi-decade lows in home sales. 20-year lows in home sales, unprecedented, particularly at a time when monetary policy is extremely favorable and everybody's enjoying full employment. Well, a lot of that activity that was on the sidelines has jumped back in for, again, whatever reason. I would attest some of it to lower mortgage rates. And so now we have a situation where sales volumes have picked up right along with their 10-year averages. Prices, I would say, in my opinion, and based on the data that I'm looking at, which we'll probably get into more next week or in the detailed Saretsky report coming out later this week, is prices have basically stabilized. You could argue at the high end of the market, luxury market, they're probably still inching down ever so slightly, but I would actually argue that at the low end, they actually are beginning to reflate a little bit to some extent. Again, this shouldn't be a surprise given that if you look at the condo market in Greater Vancouver, there is just under 4 months of inventory for sale. And again, less than 4 months of inventory for sale is indicative of a seller's market. So it's hard to imagine a scenario where prices are falling when there's less than 4 months of supply. you need supply to come up. That can either come through the 45,000 units that are under construction, that can come from sellers panicking to list for whatever reason. That's not a situation today. But as of right now, the inventory is low. So we have this rebound in housing right now that is underway, not only in Vancouver, but I would argue in large parts of the country. And it's a similar thing in financial markets. But again, that doesn't take away that there aren't still downside risks. That's not to say, yeah, we're moving on from here. It's another bull market, and we're going to see 10, 15% price increases for the next 3-4 years. And if you don't get in, you're never going to get in. I would argue that there still are those downside risks in the fact that nothing structurally has changed. You still have record number of household indebtedness in Canada. The debt service ratio is still at record highs despite interest rates being at near record lows. You still have overstretched consumers. You still have a record number of new housing unit that's coming to completion over the next 2 to 3 years. And so all of these factors remain at play, and you still have a situation where monetary policy is reaching a floor. It's reaching its ineffective lifespan. So these are still risks that are obviously, you still have risks of a potential recession. In fact, the recession indicator in Canada is at the highest it's been since prior to the financial crisis. So these are just the facts. The facts are that we have still indebted households, we still have a lot of new supply coming, and we still have the potential possibility, realistic possibility, that we are nearing the end of this business cycle and that recession odds are elevated. That's not to say a recession is imminent, but it's elevated. So you have all these factors that are still in play, but again, those factors haven't come into play. They're still sort of lingering in the background, and so it shouldn't necessarily be a surprise that today we are enjoying a rebound in housing. And so that's just what's happening right now. That's probably what's going to happen in the next short term. I can't obviously predict what's going to happen in the long run. Trying to predict sort of a larger scale macro event, or a credit household deleveraging or a recession, I don't think is possible to do. So again, that's kind of my view on it. But I would also argue too is that typically what we'd see is this is now officially the longest economic expansion in history. So you could argue that the rules of the game have been changed. You have central banks aggressively slashing interest rates. Again, the Fed just last week cut interest rates again. Their balance sheet is now expanding again. I would argue, as I've mentioned in these videos going back for the last year, that at some point it is an inevitability that we are going to get basically a QE4 or a QE infinity, i.e. quantitative easing, money printing by the Fed and the central banks around the world, because there's so much debt and monetary policy. Interest rates are already hitting zero or even going into negative territory, that there is no solution around this. Basically, the solution is to print money. So these are really unprecedented times, at least in modern history. So again, for me to, I have to try to factor that in. So how do I factor that in with, okay, are we going to get the Canadian household deleveraging? Or how much are central banks going to try to manipulate things to try to keep things going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all you can do is try to navigate in that environment, which, as you can imagine, is next to impossible to do. But so here we are. So we have a situation today. Again, it could agree with your belief system or against it. My belief system, personally, I'm in the camp that I believe in Austrian economics, which is sound money. I believe that business cycles are inevitable, that recessions should not be suppressed, and that there should be a limit to the amount of money that you can or should be printing. But again, I don't make the rules of the financial system. I simply live in them. So how do you sort of make your investment decisions? Again, is up to you. I'm certainly not telling people in one way that now is the time to buy or now is not the time to buy. I think that it is, again, unprecedented times, and so all I can tell you is what's happening with complete fact, without any guesswork, that what's happening right now in the market is without a doubt 100% a rebound in home activity. And again, it's going to be interesting to see, again, how does this play out in the next 6 to 8 months. I don't know, but I can tell you that's what's happening right now is that sales are up. Inventory is not increasing, it's actually declining. A lot of that is new listings are being suppressed. I think this has a lot to do with sellers not having any sort of reason or need to panic in order to sell. And so, and again, you can say, well, why do they not have a reason or panic to sell? It's because interest rates, which should normally be quote unquote normalized or raised to end the business cycle, they are not being raised. In fact, they are being slashed, and we're injecting more and more money into the system to try to keep it going. So what would be a normal cycle, it would be a normal occurrence to raise rates and basically kill the cycle, is not being allowed to be done. And a lot of that is because there's so much debt in the system. I think that central banks are very nervous about what the implications would be, and how do you get out of and or fight a recession when interest rates are already at basically zero in much of the world. So the goal right now for them is to basically try to prolong the cycle, and I think that the Fed has been very upfront about that. Certainly the ECB has been upfront about that, and Japan as well. So those are the three largest global central banks today. So anyways, that's my thoughts this week. My thoughts are basically that there is a rebound here today. Again, nothing has changed structurally. We're still in this absolutely obscene environment where, again, from a fundamental standpoint, again, certainly doesn't make sense. I mean, but this is just the environment that we're in. I think what doesn't make sense is having $16 trillion in negative yielding debt. That doesn't make sense, but that's the environment that we're in. So again, until that system sort of unwinds, I suspect eventually it probably will, then we're sort of left to try to figure out how to proceed in the time being. So yeah, again, always fascinated. Again, if you want that Real Vision subscription, highly encourage you to make a comment in the comment section below. Again, I'll just pick one person, my treat. So and thank you, Victor, again for the donation. So hope that helped. Otherwise, see you next week.